Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Tuesday, February 14th, 2017. It's Valentine's Day. Make sure that you don't end up in the doghouse. Ensure your significant other, boy or girl, is satisfied to their needs on Valentine's Day. You definitely don't want to be in a doghouse over a 3-game slate, I can tell you that. Um, Yesterday was awesome for me. My cash lineup did phenomenal. I pretty much placed in the top 10 in every cash game I did. And the smaller ones I did pretty well. The smaller 50-50s and whatnot I did very well. Even my GPPs I did well. Um, Definitely a very profitable night, so I'm happy about that. Had a lot of Bledsoe, had a lot of Jokic, and not even in my cash games I didn't even play Jokic, and I got away with it. So that was okay. I got a little worried. I had him in GPPs, of course. I mentioned I was going to put him in GPPs with Steph. Steph killed a lot of my GPP lineups, but I still had a few without him. I had a lot of Barton yesterday. A lot of Barton. Played him in cash and GPPs, which was obviously a good move, and I was pretty happy about that. So yeah, yesterday was a lot of fun. We had an awesome slate. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up on the podcast. Obviously, the All-Star break is coming up this weekend, so we're gonna do a podcast today, tomorrow, and even on Thursday. There's only a two game slate on Thursday, but I'm still gonna try to break something down and give you something to listen to over the break. Um, when we get back, we are gonna start incorporating some guests. We got a couple awesome guests, a couple pros, a couple guys from actual up and running other DFS websites with premium services. We're gonna bring some guys on, some guests on, I should say, and I try to have them share some of their insight. You know, I always talk about networking. I always talk about wanting to hear other DFS players' perspectives and whatnot, and I really believe in that. I think that that's the best way that you learn. Some people are very good at small slates. Some people are good at large slates. Some people are good at GPP. Some people are good at cash. So it's typically a good idea to get the gist and kind of really, pick everybody's brain and allow others to pick your brain. Maybe there's a way you're thinking that's flawed and somebody can point it out right away. So it's possible. It's really good to network in these kind of situations. What you don't want, now when I say network, I'm not talking about teaming up and everybody playing the same lineup. I don't think that I think it kind of take away the fun and the skill away from the sport itself, from the game itself, I should say. And when I say, you want to congregate, you want to exchange a couple picks or put some insight on a few players, that's fine. But you don't want to sit there and share lineups and everybody use the same lineup and whatnot. It just kind of takes the fun out. But anyway, today we've got 3 games, so it's not as extensive. So we got a little bit of time here, and I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss last night's large slate. So what we saw was, now I had mentioned that I was concerned that Denver was returning home after a long East Coast road trip, and while that was a valid concern of mine, Golden State was actually playing a 3-4, and to make matters worse, they were coming off a super high intensity, high emotional game. I think I mentioned that yesterday on the podcast. So I'm not surprised that Denver kept it close. I am surprised that they won so significantly. I was surprised they were so dominant, but I was not surprised they kept it close. And that was why in the podcast I was saying I was going to keep them. I was going to definitely have a couple of GPP lineups where I game stacked that game. Obviously, the game stack itself didn't work. You really just wanted Hernan Gomez, you wanted Barton, and you wanted Jokic. And from the Golden State side, you could pretty much have done without any of them. I think McCall had a pretty good game for his price, but none of those guys really performed. I guess Durant was the guy you wanted. Curry was the guy everyone played. Durant was the guy that I guess in hindsight everybody probably should have played. I didn't play any Durant. I figured that he was coming off an emotional peak, playing Oklahoma City in Oklahoma City, and the only guy from Golden State the only star from Golden State I really played was Curry, just like the rest of the world, and obviously that didn't work too well for me, just like it didn't work too well for you guys. But my cash games, Kaminsky and Noel, I had a lot of Kaminsky and Noel in cash and GPPs, and it was funny. I had mentioned that I thought Kemba's price was good. The guy I really wanted to play in my cash games was Bledsoe. He wasn't a top pick because there were other guys that I felt like I had to get in there, like Barton. I played Lillard just because of the usage factor. I don't know if you guys know, I mentioned on the pod, but without Plumlee, Lillard's usage, statistically on paper, Lillard's usage goes through the roof. And he didn't even have that good of a game last night. I'll admit that. He didn't play that well. But his usage is close to 40% when Plumlee is off the court. So I think that that's going to be something to keep an eye on going forward. Um, Again, Lillard, he did okay. He did fine for me. He didn't kill me. He didn't hurt me. But he didn't show that immense upside that I thought maybe he would have. And anyway, with my lineup construction for DraftKings and the cash games, I ended up not, I don't want to say being stuck, but I had no intentions of putting Kemba Walker in my cash games. Now I did have GPP exposure, and if you listen to the podcast, I mentioned I thought his price was really good. I know he'd been struggling, but he was home, and his price was really good. So, long story short, after I'm constructing, and I did not play any Hernan Gomez, just to put that out there, which is why I didn't win any GPPs. I did very well last night, but I didn't win any GPPs, and it's because I did not play Juancho Hernan Gomez. Anyway, so even aside from that, I used Noel, I used Kaminsky, I used some of those guys, I used Barton, I used Lillard, Millsap. I was really big on Millsap. He had a phenomenal game. I figured he'd eat down low. And in GPPs, I used Ed Davis, who did phenomenal. I think he got over 30. I want to say he got 34 DraftKings points on just, for a 3K salary. And in cash games, I used Myers Leonard. Figured he was safer because he was starting. He did okay. I don't know what he did. He didn't do very well, but he didn't hurt me because of his salary. And that shows us the importance of not overpaying for people, right? Especially on a large game, on a large slate like that. In cash games, I always find it to be safer to go with these lower salary guys that are closer to paying off the salary. Because if everybody on your roster hits 5.5 to 6x, you should cash in cash games. It shouldn't be a problem. Now there are some nights where there's an exception to the rule, and you see certain people like for instance that night against I think it was New York, Harden put up 80. That's a situation where if you didn't have Harden, you probably weren't going to cash. I mean, 80 DraftKings points that's a lot to overcome if you don't have that on your roster. And last night, I thought that I was going to be in that position with Jokic. Like I said, I played Jokic in a lot of GPPs, but in cash, I didn't want to pay that high for anybody. And luckily for me, he did crush it, so my GPPs did well, but he didn't overly crush it to where I couldn't cash in cash games. So I was able to avoid him in cash and still do have a really good lineup. I have Tim Hardaway. So the usual suspects. Long story short, the point I'm getting to is by the time I was done with this construction, I had one slot left, and it was for a guard. In DraftKings, you have just the standard any kind of guard, shooting guard, point guard, and I had exactly 7,600 left, and the only guy who was 7,600 or even close to that price, obviously Bledsoe was 77. He's the guy I wanted. I couldn't afford him because I didn't want to sacrifice any of the other guys. So it left me with Kemba Walker. So did I want to play Kemba in cash? No. Did it work out? I think so. I think he put up 45 DraftKings points. So it definitely worked out. And he started off super cold. So I was fine with that. Kaminsky did a phenomenal job. Noel, I wish I would have gotten more out of Noel. I think he could have done a lot better because he was crushing kind of the whole game. He was on pace to have a phenomenal game. And for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. And I think it obviously has something to do with the minutes he plays. They pull him in and out. They don't really give him like a full standard run. So that has something to do with it. But yeah, all in all, those large slates, you love them or you hate them. There are some of these large slates where the injury news is obvious. And last night, we knew about most of the injury news throughout the day. So we had plenty of time to adjust. We had plenty of time to figure out. Now, there was a couple last-minute things, like Lavoy Allen was ruled out close to lock. And I'm trying to think, there was someone else. Can't remember it. But, we did get a couple, news that was kind of last minute. But for the most part, you knew about Hernan Gomez pretty much the whole day. You knew he was going to start. You knew about Barton. You knew Wilson Chandler was going to be sick. Well, I guess that was something you could consider as new because we didn't know for sure if Chandler was going to be out. And I was taking a chance. Obviously, we got confirmation right around lock that Chandler was doubtful. So I felt pretty confident with Barton at that point. But yeah, so we had pretty much the whole day to kind of figure out what guys you wanted to play. We knew about the trade. We knew about Myers Leonard and Ed Davis. We knew they were going to be the only two options. We knew Myers Leonard was a starter. So in those situations, I mean, those are your pretty much ideal situations. You have all day to figure out what the value is you want to play. You have all day to figure out what studs are going to be in the best matchups based off those injuries. And that's why we always gear the podcast around the injuries because it's the most important thing. It determines what value is going to be there. It determines, how good a player. For instance, even today we got Collison, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. Collison is 7,100 on DraftKings, and I don't want to play that much. I don't want to pay that much for him. It's a 3-game slate, so we might not have a choice. But my point is, Lawson is currently questionable. If Lawson plays, there is no way that I'm going to pay 7,100 for Collison. Well, that's on a standard slate. On a 3-game slate, I might have to if there's no other options. My point is, I think he's priced for a guy that's playing 40-plus minutes with no backup, right? So if Lawson plays, that's no longer the case. He's no longer a guy that's going to be playing 40-something minutes and has no backup. He's going to have a backup. He's going to have Lawson. So it's very, very important to keep up with injury news, and I can't reiterate that enough. And you'll see when we bring on these guests going forward, I'm sure they'll tell you the same thing. So anyway, let's dive into today's slate. It's not going to take too long. We only got 3 days, so this will probably be a shorter pod. We're going to run through the injuries again. There are a few. We got Patrick Patterson is questionable with the knee at Chicago. Jimmy Butler's doubtful with his heel against Toronto. Paul Zipser's doubtful with with a back injury against Toronto. And Dwayne Wade is doubtful with an ankle against Toronto. So, as we can see already, I think there's one other person who may be out. I don't know. Anyway, so that's what we have to start. So basically, it looks like the main Chicago guys aren't going to play. So right off the bat, that kind of gives you some insight as to where you're going to get your value from. Not necessarily you, because I think in GPPs, it's pretty clear here that the most people are going to look towards Chicago for value. And that's because, just to start off, they're the team that doesn't have any value. Also, real quick, I noticed DraftKings was doing this early lock slate. I guess because of Valentine's Day, they're trying to do the guys a favor and keep them out of the doghouse. They decided to they have a slate that it's still the 3-game slate. It's just like the main slate, but instead of locking at 8 o'clock Eastern like the main slate, it's gonna lock at 4 o'clock Eastern. So 4 hours prior to the actual lock. And the reason for this, I believe, is so that you can put your lineups away, lock it, not feel like anybody else has an advantage on you, and then you could go out and do what you got to do with your significant other for Valentine's Day. So I thought that was a pretty cool idea. I don't know if I could put something out there where all the games are going to lock at 4, because we do have some injury information we're waiting on. I've learned my lesson with doubtful. We see these guys that said it's doubtful, all of a sudden they're cleared to play. So I don't know if I could bite that bullet, but I think it's definitely an interesting idea. I thought it was a great idea. Anyway, back to the slate. So with Butler out, we would normally look to Wade. However, Wade's supposed to be out. So who do we look to then? You can look at guys like Michael Carter-Williams. I cannot stand Michael Carter-Williams, I'm going to be honest with you. And it's not like, oh, he's burned me. That's not the reason per se. It's because he's so inconsistent, man. And, if he's not in the good graces of his coach, if he upsets his coach or he's not playing well, he's going to get pulled. So he's not really a lock for the minutes now. Most recently against Minnesota, he had a good game. Played 30 minutes, and he got 31.25 DraftKings points. However, his salary was $4,200. He's all the way up to $5,200. So I think that's DraftKings just kind of smartening up to the fact that Butler and Wade are probably not going to play. So they jacked him up $1,200. That's a lot of money to pay for Michael Carter-Williams, especially when he's going to have most likely Lowry and DeRozan defense. I guess they could put him at the 3, but even so, he still got DeMarre Carroll defense. So it's not so attractive. It's very obvious that in general, people are going to use the Chicago guys as their value. So if you want to be different, try to put up a different lineup construction. Does that make sense? So if everybody else is going to be playing like Boogie and LeBron, and they're going to be using these guys, Michael Carter-Williams and maybe those kind of, maybe like a McDermott for value, think outside the box. Try to switch it up in GPPs. In cash games, I think that's kind of the way to go. In cash games, I think the safest way to go is to find some Chicago value, pay up for LeBron, maybe Kyrie, maybe Boogie, whichever one of those guys, whichever pairing of those guys you can fit. We know Kevin Love is going to be out, and that was going to be the next thing we were going to talk about. A guy that I like from Chicago, with assuming that all these guys are going to be out, I like Taj Gibson. He's only $5K. You could put him at power forward or center. Now, against Minnesota, he didn't really play the minutes, and that was concerning. However, I think that was more of like a fluky kind of situation. I think standard, normally he will play those minutes, and they're going to have to rely on him. They're going to rely on him very heavily down low to get some rebounds, put up some points. We saw recently in a game. Now, the thing that drives me crazy with Gibson is you would think I think Mirotic is out. So with all these other injuries, you would think that would mean more opportunities or more minutes for Gibson, but that hasn't necessarily been the case because they have been playing. I want to say Portis has been getting some run recently, right? Bobby Portis is 3,500. He just played 30 minutes against Minnesota. So there you go. That's the reason that Taj Gibson didn't get a run. Now the problem is he played 31 against Minnesota. However, before that, he played 4 minutes, 6 minutes, and 6 minutes. So you don't really know which way they're going to go here. If you could figure it out, obviously you're ahead of the pack. It's going to be difficult because the Bulls rotation they're still looking for it, right? Like, first of all, we've heard that they're unhappy with the leadership of Jimmy Butler, and now they're questioning whether or not he could really be the franchise guy. Not based off of his skill or performance, obviously he's an elite player, but just based off of his leadership. And so the Bulls are still messing around here. I don't think they really know. We obviously know the coach had a falling out with Rondo a while ago. He's not happy with Wade and Butler, apparently. He's not happy with these young guys. He's not happy with Michael Carter. I mean, it's just a miserable setting over there. It really is. And it's going to be tough. This game has the lowest total on the board. On a 3-game slate, I'm not too concerned because the other totals are like 217 to 218, and this one's I think it's 205 or 208. So it's not all that far off. I mean, I'm not going to not play a guy because of 12 points in a total. That's spread out across an entire game. But anyway, I definitely think that Chicago is going to be where everybody else looks to for value. So if you can switch it up, be my guest. Moving on, we got Shumpert is questionable with an ankle. If Shumpert doesn't play, I think you could look at Korver for sure. I mean, you could look at Korver regardless. On a 3-game slate, you can kind of consider everybody. But if you want to play LeBron, which Kevin Love is out, we mentioned that Kyrie and LeBron are obviously guys that people are going to want to go to. Now, LeBron is going to have Wiggins. I'm not too concerned. I think LeBron is obviously a lot bigger and stronger than Wiggins. And with Love out, LeBron will probably play the 4 anyway. So I would imagine he's going to see like Gorgie Dieng. I'm really not concerned about that. So I like Kyrie. I like LeBron a lot today. And listen, I always talk about not playing LeBron in GPPs. That's on large slates. On these small slates, you do kind of have to buy your points. So I think this is a situation where it's okay. So I do like the two of them. I like Channing Frye. I think there's some interesting value. I think he'll be pretty popular, but in cash games, I don't see why you wouldn't go there. Now, his price is all the way up to 49. I haven't really seen his price up this high. So obviously, they knew that Love wasn't going to play because in Denver, he only played 11 minutes and he was 3,800. Now, all of a sudden, he's 49. So DraftKings smartened up to the fact that Love wasn't going to play, and they jacked up his price to 49. That's a little expensive. At 4,900, honestly, at that point, I would rather play Taj Gibson. So, I mean, you do what you can. The good thing about Channing Frye is when Love is out, you do have his minutes have been pretty consistent around that 20 mark when Love is out, so you kind of know what you're going to get. And he should start. I would imagine he might not start. Sometimes they start Richard Jefferson instead, but he could start. But I think Frye is an interesting option with him out. We talked about Korver if Shump doesn't play. On the Minnesota side, I don't know. On the Minnesota side, it's interesting. You got Karl-Anthony Towns is 10K, so he's kind of like the barely double-digit stud. He's going to be overlooked. Towns is certainly going to be overlooked against Cleveland. I would imagine, just because I feel like people are going to want to buy LeBron at 10.5 over Towns, and they're going to want to pay for Boogie if not. So I think Towns is probably the lowest on everybody's list, which I don't think is. I understand it. Cleveland's been pretty good against bigs this year. They collapsed down low. Now, I think that Cat is a different kind of big. I think he's going to give him a hard time. And when I look around, I think Wiggins will have a harder time in this matchup. I really do. I don't think he's going to – Wiggins isn't strong enough, I don't think, to grab a lot of boards in this situation. I think an interesting punt play on Cleveland, Tristan Thompson, I think is a very interesting punt play on the Cleveland side of the ball. Let me see – he's 5,500. His price came up, but he's going to get those minutes. He's going to play those minutes. He does have some upside. We've seen it, and I think that's why his price is bumped. And against Karl-Anthony Towns, actually a really good matchup. And Tristan Thompson has played a lot better with Love out. because he's the only guy down there to soak up those rebounds and whatnot. So I definitely think Tristan Thompson is a phenomenal play today. There's a lot of ways you can go. It's a 3-game slate, but there's a lot of ways you can go. There's a lot, especially for GPPs. There's a lot of different ways you can go. But anyway, going back to Karl-Anthony Towns, at 10K at GPP only, I wouldn't put him in cash just because Cleveland has been good against bigs. But in GPPs, I think he's definitely worth consideration for sure. In cash games, I'm not going to play too many GPPs. I don't like to play too many GPPs on these small slates. I know there's a lot of people out there who are extremely successful at playing GPPs on small slates. And when I've talked to some of them, it's been, from what I've heard, it's mostly because they find it to be a little bit more predictable as far as ownership. You can kind of figure out. And I see their point, because today you can already see the Chicago value is probably going to be the chalk. LeBron James, probably going to be the chalk. Boogie Cousins, probably going to be chalk. So you can really kind of get a gauge for who's going to be chalky. It's just, who do you go to? So you don't want to play the Chicago value in GPPs. What value are you going to play? You're going to just play Korver and Fry? You're going to play four Cavaliers? Like, what are you going to do? So, I think today I'm going to stick with the cash games. I'm not going to play too heavy at all. I'm not crazy about these small slates. I just think that I think some of the plays are more obvious, so I think I will go there. So we'll go ahead and we'll talk about. Oh, also we got to continue the injuries. So Ty Lawson's questionable with a hamstring. If Lawson plays, I'm not too interested in Lawson, but it's going to determine whether or not I like Collison. Garrett Temple, we know, is out. D'Angelo Russell on the Lakers side is probable, so there's not too many things to worry about there. I'm sure he'll play. So let's start off. Let's go back and go position by position and talk about some of these guys here. So we got Kyrie Irving at 84, Kyle Lowry at 81. That alone is interesting enough. Kyrie Irving is going to get the usage bump with Love out, and he's got a good matchup against Rubio. However, Tibbs in Minnesota in general are pretty good defensively, and they're one of the slower-paced teams in the league. Then we got Kyle Lowry, who's 8,100, going up against Chicago. Now, DeRozan's back, so Lowry's usage is supposedly down. But even with DeRozan playing, he's still a phenomenal player. So I think in GPPs, he'd make for a nice pivot off of Lowry if you're looking to change it up. And who is going to cover Lowry and DeRozan for Chicago? Who? Michael Carter-Williams? Rondo? What's his name? I can't even think of the other guy's name. Anyway, obviously got Darren Collison. I think if Lawson is out and I end up playing Collison, I'll be playing him at shooting guard today just because the shooting guard position is so ugly anyway. You got DeRozan at 8K, but do you want to go up there? Probably not, because if you pay all the way up there for DeRozan, there's some value options here like Kyle Korver, Ben McLemore. So I think that that's going to be the place where people want to pay down at to save on value. But if you want to be different and pay up for DeRozan, be my guest at 8K. Toronto just kind of got screwed against Detroit in their last game, so they can come out pretty angry here. I think DeRozan got fouled on a buzzer beater and missed, and they blew a huge lead to lose that game anyway. So they deserve to lose it, in my opinion, in that case. But moving on to small forward, obviously you got LeBron. He's going to be the stud tonight that I think most people are going to want, especially with what's his name out. Although Boogie's in a phenomenal spot today. He's super expensive on DraftKings today, but I mean, he's playing the Lakers, and what's supposed to be, according to Vegas, it should be a close game. It's going to be very, very hard for me not to play Boogie today, just because of the spot he's in. And I mean, think about it. If Lawson doesn't play, I like Boogie. I like Boogie regardless, but if Lawson doesn't play, I like Collison a lot. I do like Barnes today too. I like Barnes. I know he used to play for the Lakers at one point. I don't know if he's going to have any revenge. It's been a while, probably, but I definitely do like. I think I like the Kings in general, and the Kings and the Cavs. That's going to be that's going to be the teams that everybody's going to want to target. So we know what that's going to be. If you want to be different, you can go after guys like Valanciunas. I don't think it's going to be too popular today. D'Angelo Russell won't be too popular. Lou Williams, I don't think it'll be too popular, despite the fact that the Kings are so bad against shooting guards. Ricky Rubio has been playing phenomenally lately, and he hasn't been getting any credit. People still refuse to play him, and Kyrie's a bad defender. So there's a lot of different ways to go. So it's a 3-game slate, but it's a 3-game slate with options, and it's a 3-game slate with value up front. So you got to be creative if you want to play GPPs, and if you want to play cash, you're looking for safety. Do not play a guy that you don't know is going to get minutes. In cash games, he needs minutes. He could have the worst game of his life, but if he has minutes, he'll probably, unless his name is Kelly Oubre, he'll probably get at least some rebounds, maybe some assists, maybe some steals, something, even if he can't score. So minutes is everything. You can have a guy that's, a projected 2 points per minute player, but if he's not on the court, you ain't getting nothing. So it's going to be very important to keep that in mind. So I know this podcast was kind of everywhere. We talked about a lot of different stuff. The slate in general was a tough one to talk about. I didn't want to, I can tell you all day. You guys already know that Kyrie's good. I just wanted to point out who I thought the chalk would be today, because on smaller slates it's typically easier to figure out. So I think what we learned today was that what we know today from the podcast is that Chicago is probably going to be the chalk value play. LeBron is going to be the chalk stud with Boogie. And I think that guys that are going to be underowned, Minnesota in general is going to be underowned. The Lakers will be underowned. So there's some stuff that even Toronto, I think Toronto will be underowned just because of that total. So we got a lot of things to think about. And tomorrow we're bouncing back with a huge slate. We got one last huge slate before the All-Star break. And it should be fun. It should be an interesting GPP night. I think Westbrook is playing the Knicks. So that's going to be very, very interesting. It's going to be super hard to fade Westbrook. But we will talk about that tomorrow. So anyway, if you like the video, if you like the podcast in general, please hit that like button on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to the audio only version on Podbean, give us a follow, leave us some comments. We love hearing feedback. I know recently I got a tweet from somebody who heard my take on the late swap, and I do appreciate it. Listen, if the person didn't agree with me, that's fine. You don't have to agree with anything I say. I want to hear back though. I want to hear the feedback. Listen to me, tell me what you think, and I want to listen to you and whatnot. So I did a shout out to you. I did appreciate that. That was pretty cool to reach out to me on Twitter and give me some feedback. I love the feedback. And also, if you're listening on iTunes, subscribe to the channel. Leave us some reviews. Bump us up those ratings a little bit. We do this to try to educate. We do this to try to entertain, and we do it because we enjoy it. We love the industry. We love DFS, right? So anyway, if you're not a member of WiseTake.com, please go to WiseTake.com and sign up today. Membership is free. You get access to our free DFS projections, our free odds charts, cheat sheets, all that kind of stuff. And of course, we have the forums on there, which we're going to try to get going. I'm going to try to run some contests on there pretty soon with some giveaways. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to keep it nice and light before the All-Star break. I'll be back tomorrow with a big slate. I'll be back Thursday with a quick, with a short little slate. And then I'm actually off to South Carolina this weekend to visit my family. And then, of course, we'll be coming back the following week. I think it's the All-Star break ends, I want to say Thursday the next week they come back. So we have a long break ahead of us. Anyway, that's going to do it for us here at WiseTake for the DFS podcast. And as always, good luck.